In 1983, the FBI believed they were getting close. A serial killer had been hunting young women south of Seattle. The bodies kept appearing near the Green River. The victims seemed random, but the killer wasn't. The behavioral science unit was called in. One profiler looked at the crime scenes, the victimology, the disposal sites, and wrote a profile. Not a guess, a psychological blueprint. White male, mid-30s, blue-collar job, lives locally, comfortable around the highway, socially ordinary, organized, invisible. Investigators compared the profile with the names they already had. One man matched almost every category. They interviewed him. He answered every question. He stayed calm. He agreed to take a polygraph. And then, they let him go. For the next 18 years, the murders continued. His name was Gary Ridgway. Most people think serial killer investigations fail because police never find the right suspect. The Green River case proved something much more disturbing. Sometimes they already have him. They just don't recognize what they're looking at. July 1982. Two boys walking near the Green River noticed something floating against the bank. At first, they thought it was trash. Then they got closer. It wasn't. Within weeks, another body. Then another. Then another. King County detectives realized they weren't investigating separate murders anymore. Someone was hunting women, again and again and again. The victims had something in common. Most were teenagers or young women. Many had run away from home. Some were homeless. Some survived through sex work. Almost all had last been seen along Pacific Highway South. Locals called it the SeaTac Strip, a road full of cheap motels, truck stops, and people nobody expected to come looking for. Someone understood that world perfectly. He knew where vulnerable women waited. He knew which disappearances would take days or weeks to notice. While detectives searched forests, riverbanks, and abandoned roads, the killer followed the news. He watched the investigation grow. He watched the body count rise. And every morning, he drove to work like nothing had happened. He painted trucks at Kenworth. He smiled at coworkers. He went home. Nobody saw a monster. They saw Gary Ridgway. By 1983, the FBI believed they understood the killer's mind. But understanding someone's psychology and proving they committed murder are two very different things. The investigators believed they were one step away from stopping him. They were wrong. Not because they chose the wrong suspect, because they trusted the wrong tool. In 1984, investigators called Gary Ridgway back. By then, he was no longer just another name. Several detectives believed they were sitting across from the Green River killer. They didn't have enough evidence to arrest him, but they had something else: instinct. For hours, they questioned him. Where had he been? Did he know the victims? Why had witnesses placed him near Pacific Highway South? Ridgway answered every question, slowly, calmly, without hesitation. Then investigators made one final decision: a polygraph examination, the machine that was supposed to separate truth from lies. Most people still believe a polygraph can detect deception. It can't, not directly. It has never measured lies. It measures something much simpler: your body's reaction to stress. Heart rate, breathing, sweat glands, tiny electrical changes in your skin. The theory sounds reasonable. When people lie, they become anxious. When anxiety rises, the body reacts. The machine records those reactions. But that theory depends on one assumption: that the person actually feels fear. Psychopaths often don't, not the way the rest of us do. For decades, neuroscientists have studied the brains of individuals with severe psychopathic traits. Again and again, they found the same pattern: reduced activity in brain circuits involved in fear, empathy, and emotional learning. In many studies, the amygdala, a region deeply involved in processing fear and emotional significance, shows measurable differences compared with the general population. The communication between emotional centers in the prefrontal cortex can also function differently. That doesn't make someone a killer. Millions of people with neurological differences never commit violent crimes. But for a psychopath, these differences can change one critical thing: How the brain responds when confronted with guilt. Imagine sitting in a room. Someone places photographs of murdered women in front of you. Most people would feel something: fear, panic, disgust. Their heart would race before they even spoke. Gary Ridgway didn't. Not because he was pretending, because investigators were asking a machine to measure an emotion that might never have been there. The examiner reviewed the charts: breathing normal, pulse stable, skin response unremarkable. The conclusion: no significant signs of deception. That single report changed the course of the investigation. The profile pointed toward Ridgway. The detective suspected Ridgway, but the machine appeared to disagree, and little by little, their confidence faded. Gary Ridgway stood up, walked out of the building, got into his truck, and drove away. Only weeks later, another woman disappeared. Then another, then another. This wasn't simply a failed polygraph. It was something far more dangerous. The investigators had trusted technology over psychology, and the cost was measured in human lives. By the mid-1980s, the investigation had stalled. Thousands of interviews, thousands of tips, dozens of suspects. No arrests, no answers. But one man already knew exactly how the investigation worked, because he had survived it. Gary Ridgway understood something investigators didn't. The longer he remained free, the less likely anyone was to look at him again. He wasn't becoming reckless, he was becoming more efficient. Every victim followed the same invisible pattern. He drove slowly along Pacific Highway South. He never rushed, he never chased. He waited. He looked for women who were alone, cold, desperate, or simply exhausted. Women whose disappearance might not be reported for days, sometimes not at all. To everyone else, they were strangers. To Gary Ridgway, they were opportunities. Most serial killers become less disciplined over time. Confidence turns into carelessness. Patterns become predictable. Mistakes begin to appear. Ridgway moved in the opposite direction. Each successful murder became another lesson. He learned where police searched first, so he changed where he left the bodies. He learned which roads attracted attention, so he used different ones. He learned how long investigations stayed active, so he waited. Sometimes for weeks, sometimes longer. Every encounter became an experiment, every escape a reinforcement. Behavioral psychologists call this reinforcement learning. When a behavior repeatedly leads to the outcome the brain wants, the brain strengthens it. Not because it's moral, not because it's logical, because it works. For Ridgway, every time he killed and went home unnoticed, his brain received the same message: do it again. That is one of the most dangerous psychological forces in human behavior. Success rewires confidence. Years passed. The murders continued. Families kept searching. Detectives kept rebuilding timelines. New task forces were created. Fresh investigators inherited boxes filled with photographs, maps, and unanswered questions. Some detectives retired, others died. The files remained. But one decision never disappeared: the polygraph. Every time someone reviewed the case, they found the same report: no significant deception indicated. One machine had quietly become part of the evidence, even though it proved nothing. Then technology changed. Not psychology, not detective work, technology. In 1987, detectives collected something they barely understood the future value of: a simple saliva sample. There was no way to use it, not yet. So they sealed it, labeled it, and placed it into storage. 14 years passed. The killer remained free, but inside an evidence locker, time had stopped. The sample waited. It didn't know that science was catching up. By 2001, DNA analysis had become powerful enough to recover genetic profiles from biological evidence collected years earlier. King County detectives reopened the Green River files. Technicians ran the 1987 saliva sample against evidence from 4 of the earliest victims. Then the numbers matched. Not once, 4 times. Gary Ridgway's DNA was present on 4 murder victims from 1982 and 1983. The years they had his name, the years the polygraph cleared him, the years they let him go. Detectives did not arrest him immediately. They built the case carefully. Weeks of surveillance. Then, on November 30th, 2001, detectives walked toward him in the Kenworth parking lot. No chase, no gunfire, just handcuffs. Prosecutors offered a deal. Full cooperation for removing the death penalty. Ridgway accepted. Not from remorse, from calculation. Over the following months, he led detectives to 44 additional bodies. He stood in the rain and told them they were digging in the wrong place. Psychologists studying the tapes noticed something critical. Ridgway was not acting cold. His prefrontal cortex was not receiving emotional signals from his amygdala. The murders existed in a neural dead zone. No guilt, no conflict. 3 wives, a son, a church. The compartmentalization was not performance, it was anatomy. The official count is 49. The youngest was 15, Wendy Caulfield. She ran away from a foster home. She was trying to survive. Ridgway claimed the number was higher. The profile from 1983 was right. The FBI knew. The evidence waited. The machine was wrong. If you want to understand the brain behind crime, subscribe to Curio Mind. Hit the bell. Next week, why cult leaders and serial killers use the exact same brain hack. You know what to do. The brain behind crime.